Hi, you guys. Welcome back. This is Richard Sachs, and I'm here with Doug Diamond on Lost Arts Radio. This is Lost Arts Radio Live. Um, it's nice to see you again. We've got a lot of things happening in the world. I brought so many different aspects I want to talk to you about. Probably won't have time for a tenth of them, actually. But, I was thinking about all the detail to describe what's going on and how subtle the plans are, and been hearing more about the World Economic Forum lately, and all they must have thousands and thousands of employees just devising little bits of what the plans are for what to do to society and humanity in the immediate future. And because they've got hundreds of pages of this stuff posted on the World Economic Forum website, which Celeste did a really good video about that I just watched today. They've got she said there were 200 layers of different aspects of the plans that they've got for the world, from making sure that we never eat anything out of nature again to nobody has any authorized thoughts or words or actions. And the people who can't be re-educated into that, as we've heard from many other sources, they have to be eliminated, of course. And, not a very friendly plan, but it's easy to get lost in the details. And it occurred to me that a lot of the people who are inadvertently working for the plan to help the world enslavement happen prior to the next phases, which are basically extermination of life on the planet, they probably, a lot of them don't even know they're doing anything that's harmful. They're so compartmentalized. And I was just thinking how many different groups and individuals they've got working on all these different aspects of every possible little thing about the world that has to be controlled and changed to keep you safe and take care of you and provide whatever the buzzwords are at the moment: human dignity, social justice, diversity, all of these words that they choose because to the unsophisticated listener, they might sound friendly and benevolent and positive. And they're just the opposite. It's just like sustainability. Sustainability is a good idea. What it means is if you're living on a planet, say Earth, for example, and you've got this delicate web of life, which we call the biosphere, it's all these different life forms organized so they work together to sustain life in a harmonious manner. You don't want to destroy that. It would not be brilliant on our part. Of course, that is what we're doing. It's engineered and it's designed to have been that way. It's almost like it reminds me of. Did you see the movie Independence Day, where Will Smith and some other really good people are in that movie, and they have the heroic spirit of saving the world from an alien invasion. And I didn't realize when I first saw that movie quite a few years ago that it was part of a conditioning program in entertainment and the media to get us used to the idea of what they're planning to have happen in real life in the future. And when Werner von Braun was dying, he was one of the Nazi scientists that came over to continue the character of experiments and things that they were doing for world domination and eugenics and mass death and things like that within the U.S. government. It was called Operation Paperclip when they were brought over at the end of World War II. And then he was involved in rocket development, and he was telling a lady that was a friend of Stephen Greer's, I may think of her name soon. She's got a radio show on Blog Talk and probably other places too. Almost remembering who she is. Anyway, he told her, warn people, because one of the things that the power structure has in mind is a fake alien invasion. It would be like, you could call it the mother of all false flags. You see the technology that government and the deep state levels above president, which go way, way above that, top levels of corporations that really control the visible government. The technology that they've got is vastly beyond anything that we're shown. We're using the archaic forms for our own transportation, energy, and things like that. So what Wernher von Braun was saying is, referring to the fact that, as Stephen Greer points out, the hidden power structure, the really deep state, has mastered what they call gravity control. In the early 1950s, he mentioned a specific year. I'm not sure what it was. It might have been 54 or something like that. And that's when they learned to fly vehicles without fuel and just using magnetic and other subtle energies like that, 0-point energies. And at this point, they've got, according to a lot of testimony that Stephen Greer gathered, they've got their own synthetic flying saucers, to use the vernacular, ships operating silently, and they don't look quite like the originals from which they were reverse engineered, but they're pretty impressive, and they're expected to be able to convince people who don't know any better that there's this big alien invasion happening all over the world, and everybody has to give up their sovereignty of their countries in order to work together as one force and defeat the evil aliens that are attacking. And that was a theme in Independence Day, and fortunately everybody succeeded in doing that. But what strikes me about that is that attack is actually going on now. It's not evil spaceships coming in from other planets. It's much more sophisticated. And Stephen Greer's had a lot of interesting interviews that uncovered experience that deeper levels of the government have had working with downed spacecraft, which they actually shot down. Their policy seems to be kill anything that's not from here. And I would say, shoot first and ask questions later, but they don't ask questions. They kill the life forms that are piloting those craft. There's long documented accounts of that from the people that went to clean up the wreckage and retrieve the previously living beings that had been in those vehicles. It's really not any question except for the general public that hasn't been told yet. But the point is that invasion hasn't happened in the way that they're planning to try to make it appear that it's happening. Those advanced civilizations that have had technology far beyond ours, that our deep level hidden government has reverse engineered and copied, they haven't been malicious. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here talking. We'd be in a different situation entirely. But there's another form of invasion that is happening right now, and it's much more sophisticated than a bunch of flying saucers coming in to blow everything up. Like in Independence Day, it's not like that. It's the result of actually an invasion that's been going on for thousands of years, quite a few thousand, at least the last 15 or so. It's been visibly building up intergenerationally in the people that are operating it. And it's to the point where this malevolent force, this evil evil being the intent to destroy and cause pain and death and suffering for their own sake. And we're being largely controlled by that now. It's infiltrated almost all the levels of the power positions in corporations and governments, even down to a lot of the local levels. Although the lower levels of the power structure that they're using are not aware of their ultimate agenda, which is, as far as I can see, is destruction of life on the planet. So they're assuming that after all the programming that we've been subject to, that there's no way we're going to figure out what's happening. And even in their own servants, like Celeste was talking about, within supranational agencies like the UN and the World Economic Forum and groups like that, they keep the people working in those programs compartmentalized. So they're like working as experts in one specific limited field, like how does the new economy affect a certain class of people in a certain country? And it's only the people at the very top that are putting it all together and directing it in a way to lead to total destruction. And we're not supposed to know about it. So basically, the idea of complexity is a large part of what keeps it hidden, so that we can't see what it is and make a strategy to reverse it. A lot of these themes, like complexity, you can see operating all throughout modern so-called education, from grade school up through postgraduate studies and PhD programs and medical doctor programs and things like that. And what they do is they make everybody into a specialist that understands nothing but their particular narrow field, and they don't know the context of it or how it's being misused in the world. So they become a tool of destruction without even having any awareness that that's what's going on. It's a pretty clever plan. So if we want to figure out what's being done and what we need to do to counteract it, it doesn't really involve trying to learn every detail, because you could never do that. And what Celeste was talking about with the structure of the World Economic Forum, just looking at one part of what they're doing connected with the UN and the WHO and all these interconnected agencies, one part of it was the COVID-19 response. And it was obvious it hasn't just been put together in the last few weeks. It's got hundreds of levels of pages of information of how to use what basically amounts to a fake pandemic against the population. And before I say too much else about that, it's kind of a miracle that we're still in the air at all, other than the few non-censoring platforms. And just in case you can't find us at some point on the major platforms where you're listening or watching now, make sure you go to lostartsradio.com, lostartsradio.com now while you're thinking about it. And you'll see a place to sign up on the mailing list, so that if we can't reach you any other way with information, if you want it, we can send it to you that way, videos and relevant papers and information, stuff like that. You can also, without going to the website, just send an email to info@lostartsradio.com and provide a name of some kind and an email address, and that'll put you on there. We're not really using it much now, but in the future it may become one of the primary remaining communication channels, so you want to be on that. The other is that our friend Mike has set up Brighteon.com, BRIGHTEON.com, and we're able to post things there that will not get censored. So we have a channel, Brighteon.com/LostArtsRadio, or /channel/LostArtsRadio, I'm sorry. And it's now at the point where you can subscribe to it, get notified when there are new posts and things like that, and it doesn't cost anything. And it's probably a good idea if you do that while you're remembering right at the moment. So I'm going to see. And yeah, the other thing about censorship is that I do want to talk about things that I would get immediately censored for on the public platforms or at any point. So we're doing that primarily at planetaryhealingclub.com now, or at least on the private platform that's accessed via that page. And if you join that, if you want it, if you think it's worth your time and you want to do some serious work on yourself, getting your physical health back and getting rid of the limitations on your own understanding and consciousness and what you can contribute to the ongoing situation in the world. That's the kind of thing that we work on in that forum, and it doesn't get censored. So you're invited if you want to get further involved in that. planetaryhealingclub.com. Now, let me look at which little parts of this we might have time for that I brought. I wanted to tell you about Celeste's video we're posting more and more of her stuff on the site, and it's definitely worth watching, as well as her own site on YouTube. She's still up there. And basically, what I wanted to talk about was this idea of complexity and specialization versus bigger picture contextual understanding, because that's what's missing to even a lot of the so-called experts. And they know their little tiny field of study with acceptable information in it and how you're supposed to understand what's going on. But they don't know. It's really amazing, but a lot of very smart people don't have a grasp of what's going on on a deeper level with what's the attack happening right now against humanity under the guise of a health concern, a pandemic. And what's happening is the threat of the fall of civilization worldwide and the end of humanity, and not just humanity, unfortunately, all the life forms on this planet. You can see it. I mean, if you're not hypnotized into this specialized, superficial thinking, whether you're have 10 PhDs or just somebody who's looking at it from common sense, which is actually a lot more valuable than any number of PhDs, and it is becoming rare. What's going on is the attempt to bring in a new dark age of complete enslavement, followed by destruction of life and extermination of anybody that's left, including themselves, the perpetrators. It's a suicide mission. It's a ceremonial sacrifice of life, like we've talked about before. But the central element that either allows this to be completed, in which case this planet won't host life anymore, or whether it gets stopped and turned around, is down to the level of consciousness of the people. And this has been moving in cycles throughout ages. The Hindus have the old tradition of calling it yugas, which means ages, and they're saying it goes from the Iron Age to what they call the Gold Age, and then back again, and it just kind of goes like a sine wave in electronics. And they say that right now we're in the Iron Age, what they call Kali Yuga, and that it's about to change back toward golden. But that could well be true. But what's happening right now at the moment is not very good for living things here, and it would be better, in my opinion, if we don't let it run its course, or at least try not to, if we have a choice. And generally, and you can see this happening now, what goes on when levels of consciousness in the world fall, or in a continent or in a country, then that country gets destroyed from the inside, even though it looks like outside invasion might be the cause. But what allowed the invasion to succeed was the condition of the people being invaded, and that's exactly what's happening right now. And there's something called normalcy bias in psychology that you might have heard of, and it's like the mind is always trying to feel okay about things, that everything is really normal, and the fast food restaurant's still open, and you can still watch Netflix and all this stuff, so it must be all fine. And the experts are still in charge, and they're telling us that we're doing a great job enslaving ourselves and being quarantined as healthy people, which is, as far as I know, hasn't happened in our history up to now. The use of quarantines usually is for people that are so sick that they're going to make everybody else get sick and die. And even that has to be with the consent of the people being quarantined, because usually the population without the government will just enforce it itself, because they don't want to have everybody die. But this is the first time that I'm aware of that the government, in turn under orders from a medical tyranny, are telling healthy people that they have to be in house arrest. And if they get to come out, which in the U.S. in some places they're talking about now, they're talking about conditional release. If you have a business or something, you can run it at partial capacity, which in most cases means the business gets destroyed. and businesses can't survive that because most of them are working right near just the survival level. So whether this invasion succeeds or not, working through the medical tyrants and bosses depends on our consciousness and whether we have the common sense to recognize it. And it's what we're watching now. It's not just in the US where I'm sitting here right now, but it's worldwide. And there's no way that tyranny like this would be able to spread through all the scams that are in operations today, which is medical and financial and educational and technological and so many others, if we were operating, at our full capacity as human beings, conscious human beings. It kind of reminds me of, I've been involved in organic agriculture for a long time. And if a plant gets sick, it's usually because it's not getting the nutrients or it's in some unhealthy condition, and then the insects come in and wipe it out, but the insects didn't cause the problem. They're just the invaders. And the plant wouldn't be able to be overcome by the invaders if it was healthy. There's an interesting book about the so-called mythical continent of Atlantis. It's called the Emerald Tablets by somebody named Thoth, Thoth, that he talks about in that ancient country that it gradually degenerated from a very advanced conscious society with, human friendly technologies way more advanced than we have now. And it changed gradually into one of where complete decay of the social structure and evil, possession of people all over the place, which is real, by the way. I've seen it myself. And he had an unusually long life, which is a really deep story in itself. We can go into some other time. But it enabled him, because he was around so long, to watch the negative changes take place in the population of his country over many generations. And I thought I'd read you a short quote from his writing about that in the Emerald Tablets, because it relates to exactly what's happening now, and it doesn't have to result in complete destruction like it did in the story of Atlantis. I think we still have a choice. So he says, down through the ages I lived, seeing those around me taste of the cup of death and return again in the light of life. Gradually, the kingdom of Atlantis passed from the kingdom of Atlantis. Out of it passed waves of consciousness that had been one with me, only to be replaced by those of a lower star. Downward into darkness turned the thoughts of the Atlanteans. And then he follows that with the story of the continent of Atlantis, made up of islands, and it sank under the ocean, and millions of people were killed in a very short period. Too late to make the changes that would have avoided their total destruction. And the problem with Atlantis was not those who came in to destroy it, like we're seeing now in the current world that we live in globally. It wasn't that. It was the consciousness of the people that allowed a small group of them to lead them into destruction. And you can see the same thing operating on a lot of different levels. Like if you're taking drugs of any kind, legal, illegal, anything that's poisoning your system, it opens you up to influence from outside forces, I would say, without going into deep explanation, that wouldn't be able to touch you if your natural protective energy field were still intact. This is not some new age, nonsensical belief system. I'm talking from experience in this stuff. And when a person's own defenses, whether it's a physical immune system or an energetic immune system or anything like that, gets compromised, then immediately forces come in to complete the destruction. And it's just a cycle of demolition and recycling. Basically, if a plant dies in the garden and it gets weak and it can't live anymore, then it decomposes, and there's millions of organisms that automatically come in right away to help it decompose. If you see what I'm talking about, they're doing their job, because otherwise you'd have decomposing plants 100 feet all over the planet and nobody could live here. So they're doing an actual positive job. But what brings them in to eat up the plant is when it starts getting weak and deteriorating. And it's the same thing with the human body. If we're not taught how to take care of it and how to get the right nutrition and how to get the toxic residues out of it that we built up for decades and decades of living, then the toxins build up, the nutrition gets more and more deficient, and eventually the weakness gets to the point where the body's going to fall apart, basically. And nowadays we're taught that that's normal aging. It's nothing like that. That's complete nonsense. We're not designed that way. We're designed to stay in good shape until we're done with the end of this lifetime, and that you don't see that happening very much. Most of the people are, their joints don't work anymore, their heart has trouble, and all kinds of different diseases, and the older ones are on 10 or 15 different poisonous chemicals called medicine, thinking that that's actually good for them, and it's not their fault. That's what the whole system is telling us now, and it's very malicious. And even the scientists and the doctors within it, most of them don't know that they're destroying people like that. They think it's cutting edge science. They're brainwashed, and so raw intelligence doesn't save you from becoming completely unaware of what's going on. There's another faculty. It's not just the intelligence factor. It's what used to be called common sense. I don't know what else to really call it. And if we bring that back, and I'd also connect it with what I call consciousness, then we can't be deceived anymore. And all these people who have set up these intricate systems of deception and destruction intended to exterminate life in the world, including themselves, by the way, which is why they're not understood a lot. They wouldn't be able to do anything because we would be wide awake. And if we're semi-asleep all the time and our defenses on that level are down, then they're like the insects coming in to decompose the rotting plant in the garden. So if we don't want to be decomposed by those guys and enslaved and killed, then we should not let ourselves be, falling apart. We have to just shake ourselves awake and get motivated to learn what's really going on, starting with how to take care of your own physical body instead of drugging yourself to death and subjecting yourself to having your organs, cut out, and all the really obviously stupid things that what passes for modern science is telling you to do now. You've got to get back your awareness, and the experts aren't any smarter than you. It's, in fact, if you can get back your common sense, you're way more brilliant than all these experts put together. Because like in Celeste's video, they were talking about all these different compartmentalized experts that were working on their little part of enslaving the world, probably without even understanding what they were doing, just thinking they're getting a really good paycheck and they're going to have a good future in the aristocracy that is intended to preside over the starving masses. And we're just seeing the first really visible wave of this with the pandemic thing that's happening right now. It's not that the pandemic is false exactly. The virus is real, and Dr. Boyle, who we posted his videos on our site, has explained in great detail where it came from, how it was engineered, how different parts of it were put together. And you hear all these conventional experts saying, well, I think that conspiracy theory is completely wrong. I see no real evidence of it. They're just out there for deception. The real experts who have been directly involved in this kind of creation of chimera viruses and the weaponization of them further with gain of function attributes and things like that in the weapons labs, they've explained it clearly. Dr. Boyle is one of the best. He's an expert in this stuff, and he wrote the Convention on Biological Weapons that came into effect in 1989 under George H.W. Bush, who signed it into law after being passed unanimously by both houses of the Congress in the U.S. And so, it was really frustrating after the Obama administration ended, and they were afraid, since Trump, who wasn't supposed to get in the first place, might be upset if he found out that this was being developed in the U.S. They said, well, there's no problem. We'll just sub it out to Wuhan. It should be fine. And just to make sure that they don't have any money problems, we'll give them a grant from the U.S. NIH, and which is totally illegal. And you can't give grants to things like that, especially after it's been outlawed in your own country, but even before that. But that's what happened. And then people have wondered whether it was released on purpose or not. And I don't have proof of that either way, but I think there's no possibility that it was coincidence that right before it was released, they had Event 201, which we've posted videos about on our site, where they were doing an exercise sponsored by Gates and the World Economic Forum, which just happens to have plans for your whole life, and Johns Hopkins, which is really involved in the same thing. And Dr. Boyle explains their involvement. And they all came out with an exercise. So let's see, what should we have an exercise about? Maybe let's see what would happen if a coronavirus got out and killed 65 million people. And they did that exercise right before the coronavirus got out. And it wasn't just a regular coronavirus. It was this special chimera with weaponized gain of function that was released. So I don't see any possibility that it was by accident. And they're getting so much benefit out of it now because what it does is it spreads fear. And fear has been recognized as a wonderful tool for population control of the whole population, because they're terrified of not following the orders of the experts. It's perfect. So the orders include things like quarantine of healthy people, which in the US is illegal because they just hope that you guys won't notice it, that it is ridiculous and illegal in the US. And when I talk about the US, remember too that the founders of the US, though, they didn't fully live up to their ideal, but they still at least wrote it down, and they made it the essential parts of the formation of a new country. And what it says in the Declaration is that everybody has the same rights. You don't get the rights when you cross into the jurisdiction of the United States. You have it because it was given to you by God, and no government, no individual can ever take it away from you, and that's the end of it. They didn't say, well, but unless there's an emergency, then you lose all your rights. You know how ridiculous that would be? That would mean that you don't have any rights because you just get some bad person getting into governments, and he said, well, this Bill of Rights thing, this is really irritating because people think that they're free to do whatever they want as long as they don't go and hurt other people offensively, And we need to get rid of this Bill of Rights. What can we possibly do? It says they're all unalienable. Oh yeah, I know. Declare an emergency. That'll just obliterate the whole thing. And the public is so uneducated now in the real sense that they think that is valid. That if it's dangerous enough, well, of course you have to give up your rights, right? For the common good, which is the basic idea of socialism, fascism, communism, all the tyrannical forms of government where you belong to the rulers. That was the idea of America, and they said, to not have that, escape from that. And they said everybody all over the world has the same rights. It's just that their governments are not recognizing them. So they have to be pretty careful in that case, not to just become martyrs for nothing. But the point is that the pandemic was not successful in the engineered virus sense because, it just really didn't kill as many people as the creators were hoping. It really fell short of that, I think. So they had to pad the numbers, which they're doing now. And we had a doctor on as a guest on the last Sunday show named Dr. Annie Bukacek. Yeah. And she was explaining, it's really interesting. The Centers for Disease Creation in the U.S. have issued orders that if you just think, you're just in the mood that you might want to put COVID-19 on the death certificate. You don't need any verification. You don't need to do any testing. And, that's all extra work anyway. And you're a doctor, or you're a pathologist or a coroner or somebody. So if you just are feeling like it's probably could be COVID-19, then you should put that down and don't worry, because it will never be reviewed. And this brave doctor, this lady last week, was explaining how that's being done, not just in the US, but all over the place. And if you wondered where the tremendous numbers are coming out with all the incredible number of sickness and deaths that's being caused by the COVID-19 disease, while the hospitals that the media is saying are overwhelmed and just dying because the patients can't even get in, there's too many, and the doctors are giving up, they've worked 100 hours without any sleep, and that kind of thing. And then somebody runs down to that hospital after the mainstream news shows it overwhelmed, and they video it with their own cell phone, and there's nobody there. And it's too scary for most people to think that this could be true. And I don't try to convince anybody, because most of them would just say, no, that can't be true. This is a conspiracy theory, and you're one of those people. I need to call 911 or something to make sure you get turned in to get the proper care that you need to come back to normal, or be kept somewhere safely. They can't imagine that that's going on. It's like Goebbels, working under the Third Reich, was saying, if you're going to tell a lie to the population and you want them to fall for it, it should be really outrageous and gigantic, because if you just lie a little bit, they may find out. But if it's so gigantic that they'll think nobody would ever lie about something that big, that's what you need to do. And that's what's being done by the invaders of our planet right now. It's a lot like Independence Day, except they didn't come in spaceships, at least not that I noticed. And there are millions and millions of them in this intricate power structure and business plan to take over the planet. And they don't want to take it over to inhabit it. They want to take it over to destroy life here. And I think most people have a really hard time grasping that. If it was about money, and this other species of beings just wanted to take it over and have it for themselves, or enslave us and take all the money, they might understand that. But the idea that the people in charge just want to destroy life. Now, I'm just talking about the top level, all their servants at all the levels in corporations and positions of government power. Those guys, many of them are working for money and power. And that's what they're motivated by. That's what they're given as their, like the carrot hanging in front of them. And the stick, in case they don't behave, we'll just have to, destroy you, fire you. You'll have no way to work anymore. And if you're really uncooperative, we probably have to kill you. And between those two motives, positive and negative, almost all of them obey. But there are increasing numbers now that are coming out with the encouragement of great projects like Project Veritas and a lot of other ones like that, and saying, oh, well, this is what's happening actually inside my corporation. This is what's happening inside my government agency. That happened to the Centers for Disease Creation a while back with William Thompson, and we did shows on that, and that was amazing. Of course, nothing ever came of it. More public awareness, but the government refused to do anything about it, recognizing the corruption that was operating there. But that's because they've had Congress people and presidents that have been willing to obey, not to rock the boat. And there's one in there now that's wavering between rocking the boat in a really dramatic way versus going along with the facade, not because he is trying to be harmful to the country or the world. I think it's really clear from his actions that that's not the case. But there are people around him keeping the information away from him on what's really happening. And some of it's starting to get to him now. And he realizes the people he's got on this medical team that's been appearing with him in in press conferences, they're all criminals, like really bad criminals. They didn't make a mistake on some paperwork or something. They're consciously working to destroy and totally annihilate the country and any residual freedoms in the world, probably thinking that they're going to be in the elite ruling class in the world government to come. And they don't understand, because they haven't been told, that at the top level, the real plans are that everybody gets eliminated. But it would probably hurt morale if they explained that, so they don't. And what's been happening, as I said, over the last few thousand years on this planet is really accelerating right now. And so all of our criminal media in the US, not the independent, brave, honest media, but the criminal major media structure that we've got helping to control the minds of the people in the US is they read off teleprompters, the anchors and the people that do the newscasts. It's not like they have to come across like good actors, like they're telling you what they really sincerely think, but they're reading it off the teleprompters, including what facial expression to have, what tone of voice to use, and the whole thing. It's really an amazing production. It's probably the most extravagant large movie production that's ever been staged. And an example of it happened, I think, this week, a little bit earlier. There was a hospital where they had one of the major news networks had hospital workers bring their cars and line up. They were desperate patients trying to get tested for this disease and get in the hospital, and they couldn't because there were too many of them. Well, all but about one or two were totally fake patients. They weren't real at all. The media knew that, and they were staging it to keep the people terrified and willing to do anything not to get killed from this new terrible disease. Well, in reality, and everybody has to get tested, and the reason for this emphasis on universal testing, in my opinion, because of what I've seen so far and all the people on the inside that I've talked to, is that there is no testing going on for the specific virus in question. None. That's a big deal, okay, if you see what I'm saying. Instead, the testing is going on for coronavirus. Well, coronavirus is a huge family of viruses that mostly do no harm at all. Everybody's got them, or they've got the evidence in the form of antibodies that they used to have it. If you got a cold or you had the flu for a while or something like that within the last 10 or 15 years, maybe a little longer, but usually within that period, then they'll be able to test positive, get you to test positive for having had coronavirus. And that means that you're positive and they can do whatever they want to you, including dragging you out of your house now and isolating you in an undisclosed location. And if you're not aware of that plan, the World Homicide Organization, the Secretary General, I forget his name, he was saying, these lockdowns have been really good, but one thing that they've done is they've pushed the disease back into the homes because people are hiding in their homes terrified, right? That's the whole point, so that we can do whatever we're going to do next to them, which is already not going to be very good. And he said, so we have to send people into the homes to check on them, test them, right? Which is this fake test that tests for coronavirus instead of the specific mutation of the real virus now that I don't think they even have a test for at all. And they're trying to change the language so you don't notice that. And everybody has to be tested. I think even the president was falling for that. Hopefully he figures it out soon, or maybe has already. And then they can test all the family members and make sure you're not standing close to each other too. And then disappear you into an isolation facility in what did he say, a safe and dignified manner. So don't worry that you're being kidnapped, because it's going to be safe and dignified for sure. Now, that wasn't just a theory that he thought would be nice if they could kidnap you. the people who are going to be going into the house and testing to see if that needs to be done to you are called by the nice name contact tracers. And we just posted a video about that work starting to be done in the US and elsewhere. It was a really good video by Spiros Skouros, I think. He's been doing some great work lately on he's still on YouTube, amazingly, but he's got a BitChute channel too. And he was saying they're already hiring thousands of people who are unemployed in the US because of this lockdown thing. It's not because of the virus. The virus does not cause depressions. The virus is not killing the number of people they expected at all. It's very, very low. They're having to pad the numbers and as I said, call every other death at something similar as happening from COVID-19. But these people in the US, there's massive unemployment, worse than the Great Depression. And it may not even be reversible. Well, I'm going on the thought that it is reversible. We'll get to that at the end here in a minute. But anyway, there's this massive unemployment right now, like beyond the Great Depression. And so they said, perfect, we'll just hire those people to go into your house and check on you and say, the Secretary General of the World Homicide Organization said, they just want to go in and say, how are you? Are you feeling okay? Do you have a temperature? Let me check your temperature. Do you think maybe you need to be tested for the virus? Have you been tested? Do you have proof that you've been tested? Maybe we should test you right now. And of course, what they test for is so generic that if they want you to be positive, you're positive. And then contacts, that means everybody you may have been around, your friends, your neighbors, your associates in work, everything. They want all the information on them from you so that they can go ahead and start investigating them and see if they're okay too. So if you see where it's going, this is only the tip of the iceberg. Celeste has been talking about the same thing. But it's compartmentalization and lack of consciousness that allows this kind of stuff to go on. Otherwise, people would never fall for it. So how do you get your common sense back when you're being bombarded with fake news all the time? And I mean mainstream fake news, not the independent journalists. There's very little fake news in that group. They're mostly trying to do a good job. The fake ones that are the major corporate news media are very powerful now, and so is the educational system. So are the so-called scientists that just work for the highest bidder. There are some real scientists that don't do that. I mean, Judy, whose last name I can't mention now, we've talked to her before. She's real, and it's really worth watching her video, which we have posted on lostartsradio.com now. And it's also on some other platforms, Band.video and Brighteon, places like that. How do people start waking up? Well, I'm suggesting that one of the things we need to do is get your physical health normalized again to the extent that you can. If the medical system has already cut out your organs and made it so that you can't survive without a certain drug every day, that you can't get off of, good doctors can help you get off the other ones if they understand what's going on, then you're limited in what you can do. But most of us have somewhat of a physical body left somewhat intact, and just learning not to keep harming it with poison food and poison water. And like, you don't drink water with fluoride and other poisons in it. You don't bathe in it. It's really not a good idea. And you're told that the health authorities say it's really good for you. No, it's not really good for you. It's harmful. And one of the biggest obstacles to understanding that is that we've been trained since birth to not just respect, but basically worship authorities, especially if they're in some kind of uniform. The medical authorities, a lot of them have white coats, and they look really respectable, and they have memorized a lot of things which they tell you, and some of those things have long words in them, and they like to call a certain health condition, for example, some very complex Latin word that you say, oh my God, I have that. I was hoping that wouldn't happen. What do I have to do, doctor? I'll do anything. It's not that complicated to fix your own health, or at least to improve it. And the reason I say that is connected to consciousness is because consciousness works better when you have a functioning brain, because the brain is like an interface between the mind and the physical world and the body. And the brain is compromised by toxic chemicals, even if they're called medicine, even if they say they're wonderful for you. If they're poison, they're not good, and they don't help your brain. And the additives, the poisonous chemicals that are put into food, the idea that we would ever eat anything like that shows how far gone our common sense is. That's not food. So most even without the current food shortages that are being caused by the lockdowns, we had a food shortage before. It just wasn't visible because most of the food in the grocery store wasn't fit to be consumed. It was processed and full of chemicals and poisons and totally dead. You know, it's been on the shelf in some warehouse for a long time. There's no life force left in it. And so you have these epidemics of degenerative disease and people susceptible to infections, just like in the garden, where the plant is not healthy, so the insects can come and eat it up. It's part of the natural cycle. That's supposed to happen when something needs to be decomposed. You're not supposed to do it when you're still alive. So we need to learn again how to do that. And right now, people are being pushed in the other direction, you know, through starvation happening mostly in third world countries. And the media is saying, yeah, the virus is so terrible that it's causing starvation worldwide. No, it's not. It's so unterrible that the numbers have to be padded and they have to falsify the death certificates to make it look really bad. What's causing the starvation, which is starting in Africa and India and Latin America and places where they're just barely surviving, and then you cut off the supply chains of food that go through the U.S., and hundreds of millions can die from that. And it's starting now. And some of the world agencies have said that 130 million will be in danger of starving. That's excess starvation over what usually happens this year, not from the virus. The virus is hardly doing anything. It's from the shutdowns. And so what the rulers are saying is, well, that we might let you out a little bit. It's called a phased or a conditional or partial reopen. But if they reopen on a phased or conditional or partial basis like that, it won't be enough to save the economies. And some people think, well, it's the economies. I'm not a stock investor or anything like that. That's not the point. If the economy is destroyed, you won't be able to work or get paid anywhere. And if we think we're being told, and I think this is probably all the current government could do under the circumstances, give out little bits of free money to people that were in desperate condition because of the lockdowns, not being able to work. That doesn't work for very long at all, because what happens is that the money is just issued out of nothing. It doesn't represent anything. I know this is hard to grasp because we've been taught that economics is really hard to understand, and you have to have PhDs in everything and be an economic specialist and expert. That's all nonsense. It's common sense. If you get your common sense back, which I highly recommend, then you can understand any subject if you put your attention on it. In economics, you have money which is supposed to represent value. That's why in America it was set up as silver and gold, because they're both usable, they're scarce. You can't ever have inflation if it's based on silver and gold. Inflation being a way to, steal everybody's wealth. And so they took it away from that, and this private company that's in charge now, called the Federal Reserve, which is not federal, not part of the government, and is above the law, has never been audited fully, is not transparent. They are gradually stealing the value of the money without having to steal the money itself. So the purchasing power of $1 now in America is the same as what a few cents would have bought when the Federal Reserve started in 1913. It needs to be disbanded and abolished. And a few brave people have said that in the Congress, but it never gets anywhere because I guess all the others are controlled by bribes and blackmail, and they're too afraid to do anything. But we're at a turning point now. If we're all too afraid to do anything, and I'm not advocating aggressive violence, that's a really bad idea. And that would be an excuse for the rulers to just accelerate things much worse. But I'm talking about working on yourself, getting your own health back, getting your consciousness back. Stop wasting your time. You can look at your thoughts and your emotions right this minute. If they're on criticizing and condemning somebody else, thinking how dumb they are, or how somebody is an idiot or wrong or a bad person, or hating people for any reason, that's like an absolute shut door on your consciousness, your ability to perceive what's going on. It's exactly what your rulers would want you to do, is be distrustful of everybody else, angry, and what that always masks is fear underneath everything else. That's their specialty. So you're walking right into that. If you're hating anybody, even if you're hating them, that's a mistake too. And some of the great people leading a resistance against this destruction are making that mistake. Fear doesn't make you more able to perceive anything. It clouds your vision, and it's the same with anger. You have much more power if you learn how to focus your attention without the anger part, and definitely without any fear, and it's possible. And I'm suggesting we do that. Learn how to get your health back. Learn the real concept of aging. It doesn't have to be anything like what we've been taught. Aging doesn't mean your body falls apart. That's unnatural and unnecessary and reversible. Same thing with the degenerative diseases. And no, I'm not giving medical advice. Sorry, you guys. But that's not even the realm to look in for health. There are natural laws that have been in operation since the beginning of life on this planet, and the same in other places too. But the ones for this planet are the design principles of what allows you to get back your normal state. I'd say learn about that. You can do it. You can learn anything you want to learn. You're not the dumb, helpless being that we've all been taught that we are. We don't need teams of experts to teach us what's going on. In fact, they're going to do the opposite. So the first step is to get that back. The second step is to learn what comes after that in terms of what consciousness really is, that it has useful physical level tools that can change this whole situation, not by destroying the bad guys, but by waking them up, even though it sounds totally impossible. So, I succeeded in covering about 1% of what I brought to talk to you about, but in half an hour, we've got the Planetary Healing Club meeting, and that's for people that want to go a lot deeper into this stuff, and I'll talk to you about the research work that I've done for the last 50 years, most of which I can't say publicly very well without disappearing on the internet. So that's there, and we can talk freely, and no medical advice, but we can exchange about how to apply the lost knowledge of health and consciousness to your current life situation, your work, your relationships, your physical health, what you can do to contribute to the world. We're going to that for real in that club meeting. So you're invited if you want. You might even be able to get into tonight's if you want to, planetaryhealingclub.com. If you have questions about it, just email richard@lostartsradio.com. I'll tell you whether it sounds like it's something useful for you at the moment, and then you can decide. The other thing is tomorrow night, we have a Sunday show. That's our guest show, totally free. You guys can come if you want to on many platforms. Stay in touch with it at lostartsradio.com. We've got a tomorrow night, really interesting nutritional guy who's one of the only sources for organic live spirulina anywhere on the planet that I know of. And he sent me a sample. It's really good stuff. And I said I'd give an honest opinion of what it was like, and it's very good. His name is Tim White, rawlivingspirulina.com. He'll be on tomorrow night. It's not a commercial. It's me questioning him about what he does, because I was really interested. The cooked, dried, powdered spirulina I couldn't use because my body got to the point of being, to some degree, cleaned out, and it didn't feel good to eat dry powder, but this other stuff is really nice. What else quickly? We're over time. We need to go. Please help us stay on the air if you want to. If you've got resources to do that, you can donate at lostartsradio.com, lostartsresearchinstitute.org, which is our nonprofit. It's a pretty interesting site. You might want to look at that. Or our Subscribestar page, subscribestar.com/lostartsradio. We would really appreciate any support that you guys might want to give us. We don't have commercials, and we just want to keep the money being really clear, and no bad energy connected at all, no dishonesty of any degree. And so we get the donations when that happens, and we get small dues for Planetary Healing Club that are quite clean because the value is amazing if you're ready to use what's there. And then I occasionally do a little bit of private consulting, which brings in money for the nonprofit, but I don't have a lot of time to do that. Anyway, it's going to be an interesting discussion in the club meeting, so go there and participate if you want to. We're going to have a lot of other interesting things to talk about as it comes up, and I'll have as many of them on this public platform for you as I can that seem like they're worth a try to get out publicly without being in the private platform. So learn, take care of yourself, shake off the addictions, drop the drugs. I'm not giving medical advice. Do it with your doctor's help if you need to. Get off of drug addictions. I don't care if it's legal or illegal. It's just as harmful for your body. Although the stress of illegal probably makes it worse, but any kind, get free of it. There's a much better high and escape from pain on the natural side than there will ever be with any kind of drug, synthetic or natural. So that will help you a lot mentally too. And then join us and we'll figure out exactly how we need to turn this around, recognize the invasion for what it is, and wake up the invaders and give a happy ending to this movie. It's my suggestion, and we'll go further into details if you want to. So thanks for letting us be with you for an hour this afternoon. Hope to see you in the club meeting, and have a great week, and we'll see you next time.